Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Scient webinar, Jumpstarting IoT, taking the first steps from ground zero to connected to devices. Just a few side items here. One, for those participating, you'll get a copy of the webinar and a recording. We will send that out within about the next 24 to 48 hours after we are done here. Additionally, if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box, and we'll get to answer those towards the end of the webinar here today. My name is Sean Otto, and let's go ahead and get started. The goals of this webinar today are to help you understand a little bit of the technology, the complexity, and the marketability of IoT in general. IoT is a buzzword that's been around for a couple of years. There have been a variety of conference topics on it, a lot of in-depth technology behind it, but when it comes to the actual implementation of it, that can be a little bit different, and not as much has been said about that or communicated that we've found out there, and we've been able to come out and help a variety of different companies work on their IoT projects to that implementation phase. And we'd like to help review some of those concepts with you and then help you get a checklist, get the idea of what does it take to go from start to a finished product where you're actually making money. The agenda, briefly here, is introductions with Matt and I, and we'll talk about what is IoT. We'll talk about the technology stack, just to identify what the complexity is of it and get you a good understanding that it is much broader than you may originally assume. We'll talk about the value of connectivity. We'll go through our checklist that we think is quite important to help you go from that IoT idea to the actual implementation. And finally, there's the ending of Q&A that you guys might have towards us. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. My name is Sean Otto. I currently lead the advanced analytics team on Scient, focusing on AI and machine learning models that come from the sensor data of IoT solutions.
And hi, everybody. I'm Matt Winkler. I come from a multifaceted engineering background, and my focus today is really finding our customers' business problems and designing solutions for them in the digital technology space. So moving on here, who is Scient? Who are Sean and I, and why are we here to talk to you about IoT today? Scient is a global engineering solution provider. We work as a partner with our clients in the engineering space to help them design, build, operate, and maintain their equipment. So that's support from the beginning to the end of a product lifecycle. And in addition to that, core engineering work, we're helping our clients move into a digital transformation with their products and services, helping them implement IoT, analytics, augmented reality, these kinds of new technologies that are enhancing the products and services that they have today.
So before we start off here, we'd like to ask you, all of our participants here, a question. And the question is, how far along are you in your journey towards IoT connectivity? So where are you and your organization at today? There's 5 different questions. You're just started thinking about it and its implications. You currently have a POC going on. You have a successful POC behind you. You plan to launch your solution here in the next 12 months, or you actually have products out in the marketplace that are generating revenue. So we'll switch over to the poll here, and please go ahead and select your answers, and we'll see where everybody is today. And we'll give you about a minute here to answer. Okay, I think that's a fair amount of time for everybody to select an appropriate response as to where their organization is today. Look at those responses that we have. Looks like a lot of people are just started thinking about IoT that have responded. Some of them are actually doing a POC, and there are others that are planning to launch an IoT solution in the next 12 months. And that's great to hear that you're at that stage where you've gone through a proof of concept, you've validated some of the value. But as we see here, there's a lot of people still thinking about it. And while there is a lot of buzz and a lot of reading that you can do around IoT, there are still a lot of companies that are sitting on the fence. They're trying to figure out how this fits into their strategy and so forth. So along with that, we'd like to go ahead and jump into the meat of things. If there's one thing we'd like you to remember today, it's that you cannot buy an IoT solution. IoT solutions must be built. Digital isn't a business unit. It's something that spans across all business units. While individuals may have titles that have the word digital in them, it's something that belongs to the different elements of an organization. Digital, at the end of the day, is everybody's responsibility. And because IoT and the connectivity side of things, we're going from analog sensing devices to digital devices. We're collecting all of this information. It really encompasses a lot more business units than anticipated in organizations today. So we like to say it takes a village to build an IoT solution. Matt, any thoughts there?
No, I think that's great, and I think that really does kind of lead us into our next topic here. What is the buzz around IoT? Why is everybody on this webinar today? As we saw, about half the respondents in that first poll we're just starting to think about IoT, and maybe they're at the place where they're trying to understand what the business drivers are. And as we've kind of laid it out here, we've got about 5 different business drivers here that we think are the true starting points for IoT. Why do you want to get started in this space? Number one is to enhance your customer experience. You can boost that brand stickiness that you've got by engaging your customer base on a deeper level. You're engaging them on the product side, but also with the data itself. How are they getting feedback from your product? How are they providing feedback to you? The quicker that cycle can become, the more that your brand is in the heads of your customer base. You can offer brand new digital products and services that were not available without the addition of a data stream or connectivity to your equipment. That includes things like subscription-based services, predictive maintenance, where you're providing a service to your customer in actually preventing further damage or any damage to their machine by taking care of things in a preventative manner, fixing things before they're broken. You can improve your operational excellence, doing things like streamlining the way that you run operations, whether it's product development or managing your inventory, or again on that maintenance aspect. Through connectivity or through IoT, you can enable a digital workforce, and that helps you really increase your employee efficiency. It helps your techs do troubleshooting quicker. It leads to further automation of tasks that your workforce would be doing anyway, and the data stream from your equipment can really enable that. And you can really strengthen your risk management and your ability to comply with the regulations that you need to in your industry. And you can strengthen the security of your products and your locations as well. This leads to you spending less of your capital on avoidable issues like theft, like insurance, like safety and legal claims that may come up. So through connectivity, you can really help reduce costs in that manner. And then in parallel to all of these things, the more information that we have flowing between disparate machines and systems that are doing a job, the more chances we have to enable automation of the processes between those different machines. And IoT enables all of that.
And why are we all focused on this? Fundamentally, it comes down to human value. And for me, IoT is about crafting that human value out of a digital world. It's about how we interact with the world. And honestly, the best technology out there is the technology that you don't notice. It's a part of your experience. And as we're designing connected devices out there, we start with the device connection. We start with what it's sensing, and we go through to communication. How's that information being transferred? Is it satellite? Is it Bluetooth? There's a lot of different ways to think about that depending upon your business circumstance. You need to then store that information. You're then going to derive additional insight through artificial intelligence, machine learning, and there's a whole area behind that that you can learn about and delve into. And that actually goes from the data analytics side into the data value. What's the opportunity for action? Where is the automation that you want to put into the processes? Once you identify those issues that are coming out of the other backend stream. And this ultimately leads to that human value of smart applications, tangible business benefits, happier customers, improved operational expenses, reduced downtime of equipment, etc. It all leads into this human value, which is the why we're looking at it and investing into it today. As Matt and I have been doing this for the past couple of years, we've noticed that there's two flavors of IoT products. The first flavor is really around existing products. And we see this today in the marketplace. This is putting a little sensor on a tire. And so we all have pressure sensors on our vehicles today. We know when that pressure is getting low on the tires, we can be reminded to go ahead and put some more air in the tires. That's something as an existing product. It's something we're familiar with. We're just enabling something that's already out there. For many companies, particularly OEMs, that's what they're doing today. Whereas it comes to the other side of things are brand new products. These are built from the ground up. These are solving new things that we haven't thought about. These are enabling digital solutions where they currently do not exist. We find this in the medical space. It's being very innovative, but we find this in a lot of different other spaces too. On the agricultural side, we find it in the oil and gas side. And that brings us to our next polling question. Where are you looking to implement your IoT solutions? Is it through existing products, or are you looking at doing it through new products and services, or both? So we'll go ahead and pull up that polling question there and let you guys answer. Give you about 30 seconds to do that. All right, let's see where people are at today, what they're trying to leverage the IoT for in their organization today. Looks like it's a 50-50 split. Existing products and services, and also a lot of combination of new and existing products. That's good to hear. And while we're thinking about what it takes to implement that, I'm going to transition over to Matt, and we're going to go ahead and have him talk a little bit about the technical side of things.
Thanks, Sean. So, as Sean mentioned earlier, from our perspective, the value of IoT really is in that human connection at the end, right? Taking information from the world around us and giving that human something actionable to do, something tangible, a tangible benefit that they can take away from it. But to get to that point, you need to involve a lot of technology, kind of start to finish in your IoT application. The way that I have it laid out here in the IoT technology stack kind of gives you a 5-column approach to the different major technological components of the IoT stack. Starting on the left with the device hardware, the actual physical things that are out there in the world, the software that runs on many aspects of the technology stack, whether it's on the device side or whether it's further to the right in the network, the storage, and the consumption application. That third column being the network and communications. All of these devices need to talk to some other devices or some other location, and it's the network and communications aspect of IoT that enables all of that. To get to that human value that we've been talking about out of our data, we need to do something interesting with the raw data that's coming in from the world around us, and that place that interesting things happen is in that storage and compute column. Where are we taking all this data? Where are we able to find computational horsepower to create new insights out of that data. That's where this happens, is in this compute and storage column. And then finally, that consumption application. This is delivering those insights that have been generated to an end user, whether that's directly to them, whether it's to the business systems that require those types of inputs. Everything that we're getting out of this needs to be consumed in some way, and so that's a very important aspect of the IoT technology stack. Now, we can think about this in a little bit of a different way as well, from an architecture perspective. Everything that we build into our IoT solution needs to be architected. From the hardware side, the sensor network needs to be architected. We need to develop or integrate sensors that are out there in the world today to take the physics of the world and convert it into digital signals that are pushed to our edge device. The edge device is essentially a computer that sits near your endpoint application and collects all of the data from those sensors and then sends that to a gateway, which further sends it out to those places where interesting things can happen. We need to think about connectivity as a product, and much like any other product, we have to think about, what is the cost of the development of that product? What's the cost of the deployment, scalability, and maintenance of that product? And the same goes here for just the hardware aspect. We need to think about, what do these things actually cost in dollars? What does this application cost in power? Do we have power at our endpoint to run these devices? Where does that come from? These are all things that need to be thought about when we're developing our hardware. In addition to that, we need to make sure that our hardware fits where it needs to fit in our application, how easy it is to deploy and scale across thousands of applications across the world, if that's what your product does. And we need to make sure that it's going to be reliable for a long time. These are all very important things to think about as we're developing our hardware architecture for IoT. So moving on very similarly, and as I mentioned before, software runs in all aspects of the IoT technology stack. And so having a robust architecture for your software is a very important thing when we're developing an IoT product. So the first place that we see a lot of that software running is actually at the edge, at the endpoint of our application, on the device that we're monitoring. There's software running at that location in the edge device, not only the software that kind of runs the device itself, the operating system, but also the software that interacts directly with the sensors, and any applications that you can run at that location too. There's maybe some interesting things, some data aggregation or analytical algorithms that can be run at that side too. All of that software sits at the edge. As I mentioned before, we need to do something interesting with the data that we're collecting, and a lot of that happens at the computation and storage layer. This is where we're actually aggregating and storing all of the data we're collecting and running those great analytics to give us business insight. All of that happens there at the software level. And then on the consumption side, as I mentioned, we're sending this information either to users directly or to the business systems that require the kinds of data insights that we can generate through analytics. And software enables all of those functions. And so software is kind of pervasive throughout every single aspect here. On the network side, the architecture of the network is very dependent on your use case and application, and needs to be defined in such a way that it's going to be efficient for your application. The first thing to think about is the topology. How many devices are you connecting, and in which way are they connected? How are they linked to each other? Or do you have many edge devices through one gateway? Do you have multiple gateways? Is every edge perhaps a gateway in and of itself? And then beyond that layer, how is all of that information transferred to the place where interesting things happen, and from there to where it's getting out to the consumption layer, with your users. We need to think about the physical connections, as far as that architecture goes as well. And I'm not just talking necessarily on wires between things, but a physical connection can be a wireless network as well. There's a lot of different wireless protocols that are out there today that support IoT data transfer, and finding the right architecture and right protocol for your situation as far as availability, speed, power requirements. Building that architecture is a very big part of developing an IoT connected solution. And then on the informational connections, what makes the IoT work is that we are having disparate systems across the world communicate with each other. And as we know, kind of in our human world, not everyone speaks the same language, and not all those systems speak the same language as well. So we need to architect the right informational connections between all of our systems to make sure that data is transferred seamlessly and nothing is lost between them. And then, not necessarily separate, but parallel and overarching to all of this is security. As we connect more devices in our world, we're potentially opening up more pathways for bad actors to access information that they shouldn't be. And so security needs to be an inbuilt part of every single piece of your architecture in an IoT connected solution. Whether it's physical device security, turning off ports that don't need to be accessed, making sure that all of the encryptions that are required by your application are turned on and used in your communications and on the cloud side. And then thinking about the life cycle of your software and your hardware in a connected solution. You need to think about security there from the aspect of needing to update your device firmware and software while it's remotely deployed, and making sure that only you are the ones who can update those software and firmware packages. It's a very important thing there to think about as we're developing a full solution.
And the question here is, why are we doing all of this? Why are we spending all of our time and effort answering hard questions when it comes to the architecture, to what technology to use, when to use it, how to use it, where to use it at different stages within the solution that we're building. And as we're trying to go ahead and find the value of connected devices, there is value at the end of the day. When we create this human value, people are willing to pay for it. Companies are willing to acknowledge that we've invested effort into it. And the question is, how do we get that out? And over the past few years, as Matt and I have been doing this, we've come to a heuristic that I think works fairly well. And we're going to position it in two different ways. The first way here is with these 4 boxes. And the idea here is to help you also develop a lexicon or a taxonomy here for identifying, as you're thinking about your IoT solutions, where do you see that value coming from? And how can you monetize it? And we have another webinar that's going to specifically focus on monetization. But when we think of where we see IoT being used in our world today, these are 4 different buckets, and I'll explain each one here briefly. The first one is doing more with less. This is around production. I have an agricultural image here. A lot of agriculture is around optimizing the yield from an acre of land. How do I get more with less work, or more with the same amount of work? And that also happens in factories today. When you're looking at manufacturing different products, you want to make sure that the quality is high. So there's a lot of this effort around doing more with less, and it helps us monitor the activities that we do have, the processes that are going on, so that as we monitor it, we can make the right decisions to maintain the production that we're after, whether it's mining, oil and gas, agriculture, or even in a brewery. Okay, same time. The next one over in the upper right is around improving safety and reducing risks. A lot of IoT is coming around and helping us understand where people are. You put a heart monitor on grandma or grandpa, and you can monitor what they're doing in their daily life. When we all are going to get old, and I'm learning that as I age, I'm not expecting my body to work as well as it did before. And if you accidentally take a fall, you're trying to monitor, improve safety, and at the same time, you want to do the reduce risks in the world today. So that's a strong application that we find IoT in. We also find it in services and solutions. the bottom left here. And a lot of that is in the B2B side of things. And I have a picture of an elevator here. And an elevator is something that goes up and down. We don't think a lot about it, but when it doesn't work, we do think about it. And we want to make sure that elevator is working properly, that there's safety behind it also. But from a business perspective, it's an internal operational expense of how do I go ahead and manage many elevators with fewer technicians. So similar to doing more with less, but it's a service that you're offering other customers because IoT is enabling that. And I can identify when equipment needs replaced. I can go out and before failure, go ahead and make replacement on top of that. So that's a service and that's being provided. The last one down here on the bottom right is something we've labeled as monitoring and compliance, even regulatory side of things. And I imagine the government's going to get more involved with the IoT as it comes out because they're able to monitor more things. And from a regulatory perspective, it can help keep people on top of what they're supposed to be doing. And at the same time, it can be monitoring for wearing a hard hat. If you have workers going into a factory, are they wearing the appropriate safety equipment? And that can be done through computer vision. So these are 4 broad areas, but we think they're very good areas to understand where IoT adds value. Another way to conceptualize that is in a concept we call the 4 trade winds of IoT. There's the harvesting component of it. As we talked about, doing more with less. There's the idea of risk mitigation. Okay. How do we reduce that risk that's out there, or how do we manage that risk better? And this can have improvement upon underwriting at the end of the day for different services that are available out there. The south side is where a lot of B2B is being found today. A lot of value is being created with the services, the integrations. This can be freemium, this can be premium packages, and it drives a lot of additional data and insights so we can make decisions. And then on the left-hand side, this idea of compliance. Are people doing what they're supposed to be doing? So this is another conceptualization called the 4 trade winds of IoT, another way to go ahead and discuss that. On to the polling question number 3. So do you have a solid understanding of the problems your organization will solve through connectivity? We've talked with a lot of customers, and as we talk with these customers, we get a feeling that most of the time they're not as connected with their problem as they thought they were when they first started. And we'd like to see where you think you're at. And so we've got 4 answers: a slight idea, somewhat of an idea, a strong idea that you know what you're going to solve, or definitive idea, meaning you know exactly 100%. So we'll pause here for about 30 seconds. Go ahead and select your answers to where you think you have an understanding of what your organization is going to solve with IoT and connectivity. All right, that should be plenty of time for people to go ahead and select their answer. Let's see what the results are. All right, nobody on definitive knowledge. So there's a variety of people. I have a strong idea or somewhat of an idea and a slight idea. And that is where I would expect, honestly, the curve to pull out. We have good ideas. We just don't know if they're valid. We're trying to vet them out. And we see that with a lot of different organizations. Matt, what are some of your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the result that I expected too. I think that the folks with definitive knowledge of the problems that they need to solve with IoT are probably working on them right now and not sitting in this webinar.
Yeah, and along with that, you know, for those of you who have a slight idea, you have a defined idea of what it is that you want to be doing. You know what business problems you can be solving for you or for your customers. Matt and I have put together a checklist here, and this checklist is what we're calling from idea to implementation. What are the things that you need to be focused on and check the box so that you know you're going in the right direction and that you know that you're going to have success at the end of the day? A lot of companies are spending money on IoT. A lot of it is around R&D. And we've seen a lot of companies, as they're approaching this, continue to ask the questions of, am I doing it right? Did I do it right? You know, what should I be doing differently? And so as we've thought this through, we think that this is a good checklist for people to look through and to think about as they're going from their idea to implementation. The first one here is just what our polling question was about. Develop a true understanding of the problems that can be resolved through connectivity. Do you really know what it is you're trying to solve? It's nice and easy to say, I've got a water pump over here. Let's just go ahead and connect up a vibration sensor to it. That's fun. That's done. We'll call it IoT and we'll move on to the next project. But there's a lot of value that can be created out of it. But what is that business problem that you're trying to solve at the end of the day? Where are you trying to create that additional value by putting a vibration sensor on a water pump, for example? Once you have that understanding, you need to go out and identify, where's the leadership at? Are they supportive of this? What do I need to do to transition my leadership to understand the value of what we're doing? And they're going to ask the question, how are we going to make money? How much is it going to cost? So you have to start setting up some of those ROI conversations in the very beginning. Another item here is gain IT support. As Matt talked about, there's a lot of software components on this from the beginning to the end, from that device, connecting up that device with the firmware, all the way to creating that human value, whether that's pushing information to a watch or a mobile device. That's the human value of information, and that whole ecosystem requires your IT team's support. Now, we've seen a variety of IT groups. Some are very support oriented, others are very development oriented. So you need to understand where your organization sits on that side of things and how they're willing to support you so that you know how you can move forward in delivering this. Next, develop a strategy to determine how you will use the data. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it may be easy to go ahead and connect up a piece of equipment or an asset, but how are you going to use that data? Are you going to store it? Are you going to leverage it for your customers? Are you going to let them create value out of it? You have to have that strategy in the beginning there. The next, we're moving into a little bit more of the technical details here. You have to select hardware to sense the data. Do you know what the software you're using to send the data? Do you know the cloud platform that you're using? And there's a lot of different IoT platforms out there today. There's a few core platforms out there that most people are using. There's a lot of different types of software. Is it log data that you're collecting? Is it time series data that you're collecting? How fast is it coming? And you need to know how you're storing that. Big data is a moniker out there, but big data can be used to store 1,000 rows or it can be used to store 1,000,000 rows. It could be used to store small video snippets or major video snippets, long video snippets. So you need to understand what it is you're collecting and how you're going to store it. Do you need to store it for long-term or short-term? Matt briefly talked about the end-to-end security. So you need to make sure you've got that checkbox set. You need to understand how are you creating that value out of the data. Are you communicating the value ultimately? That is a good question because as engineers, and that's where we see a lot of people and businesses focus is around the engineering side of things. We're putting on devices, we're connecting them up, and we're transmitting it up to the cloud, we're storing that data, we've created some mobile apps. Great. What's next? How do our customers know that this is valuable for them? Have you gone through the necessary steps of actually talking to your customers and saying, how would you use this information to better your organization or to better the use of the product that you have? You need to train people on how to use that value that you're creating, whether it's internal or external. We can go back to the elevator example. You have 500 technicians. You need to train and teach them on all the mobile apps and the information that's coming out and what it's doing to help them in their lives so that they can be more productive at the end of the day in managing and maintaining the elevator equipment that they're responsible for. And lastly, you need to have a willingness to make mistakes. There's no perfect solution out there today. Nobody that I've seen has done this perfectly. There's been a lot of mistakes along the way, and you have to be able to take those mistakes and run with it. Fix them quickly. Let me put it that way. Fix them quickly and then move forward is what I mean there. Matt, what are some of your thoughts here?
So I'd like to echo that, have a willingness to make mistakes a little bit here. You need to use this space to experiment a little bit. Try a few things, see how they work. Maybe do a limited market test, something like that. But you've got to have that willingness to try things that you may be uncomfortable with, to kind of see what the reaction is. So have that willingness to make mistakes and learn from them. Most importantly. they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, a proof of concept is worth 1,000 PowerPoint slides. So put something together, prove it out, and that'll help you define that ROI. When you're gaining that leadership support, when you're kind of going for developing a monetization strategy, I think all of that really builds on each other. And then another point here on training people on how to use the value. If your customer base or your user base internally does not see the value in the connectivity and what you're bringing out of it, it's not going to be used. And so I think that's a very important point to make is to really come at these solutions with the user base forefront in your mind. Understand how they interact with how they will interact with this connectivity product, and try to design for them in a way that they will want to use it. And I think that really kind of leads into this next topic here is thinking in terms of digital data products. As I mentioned before, connectivity is a product that has to be managed. And as an engineer, we think about developing a product. My mind goes first to, okay, what are the requirements? What are the cost constraints? How will it be maintained? But really, outside of those kind of core engineering concepts, product development is about what does the market require? What is your competition doing, and how are you putting something into the marketplace that's going to differentiate you and make that marketplace want to buy your product? And this is the exact same concept here for connectivity. It is a product. It goes out there to augment or become something new for the current product line that you have, but we really need to wrap our heads around that concept.
And that moves us into, as we think about digital products, why are we putting them all together? We're trying to humanize the value of the data at the end of the day. There are internal needs that we have, there are external customer needs, and we have to think about what are those delivery mechanisms. If you've ever tried to eat a piece of watermelon not like that, you have to cut it into slices, you have to put it together. That helps to make a wonderful experience. There are many different ways to eat watermelon, but there are many different ways to digest data similarly. And we have to be thinking about what is that human value and how are people using it, because that is what's going to create the traction and ultimately create a digital product that your customers want to use. So we've come a little bit away. We spent the last 40 minutes here talking about IoT. We've tried to keep it focused and short, and I hope we've accomplished that. But here are a few parting thoughts that Matt and I have put together. And Matt, I'll let you go ahead and discuss them.
Sure thing. So number one here is don't overlook change management. And this really has to do with the organization of your company, of your product groups, and how they all need to respond and change their roles and thoughts around their responsibilities as it comes to connectivity. We're going to get into this in a little bit more detail in the next webinar in the series, which hopefully you've all seen the link for. We'll throw up something here at the end here that's got the information, but it's an extremely important thing here. As Sean mentioned before, digital does not know a single business unit because it touches all business units. So, it's very important to understand how that change management needs to happen to support that. You can't buy IoT solutions, but you can build them. You cannot go out there and find something off the shelf that's going to meet all of the needs of your user group and of your products today. It needs to be something that you build that's purpose developed for your application. As we talked about before, IoT is a journey, not a destination. There's many steps in this, from actually defining the problem that you need to that you want to solve with connectivity, through gaining that support, reorganizing teams, actually doing that core engineering functions, and getting something out to your customers and then maintaining it long term. It is absolutely a journey. And they're just like the internet 20, 30 years ago. It was brand new, but it definitely hasn't gone anywhere. And I think the Internet of Things is going to be the same story here. We've kind of touched on all the business drivers for adding connectivity to our products, and all of those drivers are going to exist in the long term. So this is something that I think we need to be comfortable with and really understand as a core part of our business moving forward.
I was chatting with a customer one time, and he was asking, you know, why is it so challenging to get everybody around the idea that this takes time, that it is a journey and not a destination. And the analogy that I liked that I heard one time was that it's not a moonshot, it's laps around a track. And that's really what IoT is, because as you put it in place and as you develop it and as you build it, you're going to see new added value that can come from it. You're going to find surprises in the information and data and how we use it. I mean, we're still very novice here in what all we can do with it, and we're transitioning our skills and we're thinking differently about how it impacts our world. Science fiction is very good at giving us pointers to ways we can think about it, but ultimately it's not until we put it into our hands and we start using it that we understand the value that it can bring each of us. So we thank all of ye for participating in this webinar. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in. We'll go ahead and be here for the next 15 minutes or so. As you guys have questions, we'd be happy to answer them. One of the questions I see here is an interesting question. It's, how do I help my executive leadership understand the complexity of what it is we're being built? That is a tough challenge. It's, as I said earlier, it's laps around a track. And if you look at it from an annual budget, you're going to put something together and you're going to say, what do I need to allocate now for this particular IoT solution that we're putting in place? There is a lot of maintenance behind it, not a lot, but there's maintenance behind it that needs to be thought of. So you have to adjust your budgets for your products differently. I find that if you're going to silo what IoT is into either the IT group or the product development group or the technician side of things, you're going to find it challenging. Like I said, it's a village. It takes a village to go ahead and develop this. One of the most successful companies that I'm familiar with out there in the marketplace today, who has over 300,000 devices connected, and they're gathering data every day, making an impact on our world. They actually put their IoT group in the sales department, because at the end of the day, they said sales is the one who's going to be selling it. They're going to be promoting it. We need their feedback. And so they created a whole software team within their sales department to design, develop, and build an IoT solution. And that was their strategy. I found it to be very unique. I don't see many other companies doing that. But when you think about putting together your IoT direction and organizing it within your business, you have to ask the question, who is going to be the main person responsible for it? And who's going to drive the changes, the improvements at the end of the day? And so you need to align it so that it fits with that organization and your product side. If it sits within one specific organization, say like IT, they're going to have a certain bias and set of assumptions on how it's going to be delivered. And so, that is going to constrain how you put your solution together. And ultimately, you need to be very open and transparent with your leadership, saying this is going to take longer than expected. We'll get to a proof of concept quickly. But for a full implementation, it may take 12 months because there's a lot of small little bells and whistles in the way, and there's a lot of pilot testing that we need to do. There's a lot of training material that needs to be put behind it so that you can move quickly as soon as you have it in place. Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the thing that I would add to that, really from the organizational and cost side, is everybody likes pretty pictures. You don't need to be an expert to draw kind of a high-level architecture diagram and say this is what we want to collect. This is how we feel like we're going to do it. This is where we're going to send it. This is what we're going to create. And this is how we're going to get it out to the end user. A couple of boxes with lines between them, I think it tells a pretty powerful story. And you can do the same thing too on what groups do you need within your organization to support all of those activities. And I think putting together something from a very high level perspective gives you a lot of talking points. It gives you a lot of places for discussion, with senior leadership, with a lot of other groups and folks within your organization. And it kind of gives you that map, and everybody can kind of see where they fit in.
Yeah, we have a question here that's a question that's been on my mind for about the last 18 months, and it's a good one. And the question is, in the 4 trade winds of IoT, which I have showing here, for compliance, can we look at blockchain? And I would think that, yes, blockchain and IoT at the end of the day are going to have a marriage. What that marriage exactly looks like, I don't know. There's a lot of overhead today with blockchain. There are some solutions that are limiting that or reducing that overhead so that when you calculate 1 million transactions a day, it doesn't take a gig to store that or to verify all of those transactions that are occurring as valid. When it comes to compliance, I think of an IoT solution within real estate. Something that if we've all purchased a home, title is a very interesting process. And it would be interesting if you have blockchain associated with different titles for different pieces of property and the ability to transfer that and to audit that and monitor that. At the end of the day, that may be blockchain enabled, but it's still in the broader scope an IoT solution. So I do see that blockchain can be put in with compliance, but I also see it from the harvesting side and the risk mitigation side of things. We're talking about the medical space. If I have a device that's a heart monitor and I want to verify that that's the right device and I'm not being spoofed, blockchain is a way to enable that. For that compliance and that authenticity of that transaction at the end of the day. So I think blockchain sits everywhere in here. There's a lot of different areas on how to operationalize it, and because it's so new, it's still a very nascent new technology that we're still figuring out how to work with and how to work within our world. Because if I have a high overhead and that in validating that transaction does take a lot of resources and time, then it almost becomes limiting in its ability to deliver what we're doing. And so, people will scrap that out at the end of the day so that we can get to more of the value that we need right now. And it may come in the next 5 to 6 years that we're introducing more of the blockchain into it. But I'm happy with all the inroads that are being made and the tests that are being done with that. But what are your thoughts there, Matt?
Yeah, I think compliance is probably the prime example in my mind for the use of blockchain in an IoT solution. We think about compliance. Maybe one application could be, you say power plants, are held by regulation to only emit certain levels of gases for certain levels of power output, right? And if you have an IoT solution that's monitoring the exhaust stack of a power plant, and you're reporting that information somewhere, why not use some sort of a blockchain generating ledger that can be reported directly to the government? So you can actually take that whole compliance step out of the hands of people, and it's there, and it's a verifiable result that's immutable, that cannot be modified manually. I think it's something like that is a great way to think about compliance in IoT and using blockchain. If any of our attendees have any more questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But we do definitely want to note that you guys should join us for our second webinar in this 3-webinar series on December 13th. That'll focus a little bit more on how we roll out the organizational changes that are necessary to support robust connectivity solution development in your organization.
Yeah, we thank you all for participating this day on this webinar, and we look forward towards having you participate on the next webinars that we have upcoming. Thank you very much.